Hello and welcome to Education Update. I'm Nyesha McCauley, joined by
Paul Holzer. Great to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to be back. We have another update.
Yep.
So we're back again, and just off the heels of a really important time in the city's education history. The biggest news, and we'll start off with that, and then get into a few other things.
The budget hearing, right?
Yeah. No, well, that's big too. You know, the budget hearing is tonight. If you are interested, public comment is tonight. So the board sets aside a time where the public can actually go down and comment about the recommendations that they're making, how to spend school money, right?
That's right.
So
where is that? When is that?
It is tonight at 5:30 at Kinsella.
All right.
So if you have a comment about, and it's important, I mean, you know, it is a time for the board to hear community priorities. You know, how do you think where resources should be put, you know, where do you see gaps out there, or where you think that supports are needed? So this is the time to comment on it.
That was a good sell. That's good.
It's good. It's true.
Well, let's get into the superintendent piece.
Okay, so also last night the board did vote to appoint our next superintendent.
Yeah. So the vote was 8-1.
Right.
Almost unanimous. You know, you're always looking for Hartford to push forward with continuity and unity, but couldn't quite get there. But overwhelming support for the one candidate, Dr. Beth Narvaez, from Montgomery County, Maryland. She's the candidate who was at the 150,000 student district with 203 or 204 schools.
Wow.
So I think folks thought that she did a good job at the forums. And so she beat out Dr. Ron Taylor, who was from a smaller district in New Jersey, Willingboro, public schools that only had 4,500 students. So, you know, I'll just say that, you know, to the community at large, it was an honor for us to Achieve Hartford, to be a part of the candidate forum process. We were happy to do logistics and try to promote the forums, and even getting, you know, feedback and calculating the feedback and getting that to the search committee on Friday, so that they had the weekend to think about it. So it was a great partnership. We were so glad to be a part of it. But, you know, the forums ended up being really interesting. I mean, I think we should talk about it.
Yeah, you know, there were 3 forums that were held, and each forum had a different community represented at that forum. So morning, the business community, and then afternoon, educators and principals and district staff. And then at night was the community's opportunity to come to hear both candidates. So, you know, it actually, you know, full room. We were at Capital Community College on the 11th floor in the auditorium, and at every forum, you know, it was just a really great turnout. So that was good that, you know, people actually came out to hear the candidates, and got a chance to hear actually from both on same questions, you know. I thought the process was nice in that, you know, one candidate left the room, and you had this one-on-one time, if you will, with that one candidate to hear their responses. And so, you know, I tried as much as I could to gather feedback on the process. You know, was the community across all stakeholders, were they happy about the way that this unfolded, you know? Did you hear anything in particular about the process?
I heard incredibly positive things about the process, and having questions submitted so that, you know, you didn't necessarily even have to be there in person if you couldn't make it to ask the question. I mean, people thought that was pretty democratic, and having a mix of then scripted questions with questions coming from the floor. People were happy about that. We heard some feedback from educators too, that they didn't like the timing of the 3:30 forum, because it was only going to let 1 or 2 dismissal cores of teachers get there, and the last core was going to have to come to the community forum. And a lot of educators did come to the community forum, which was great. So, I mean, I think that was a great criticism. I mean, I remember bringing that up during a planning session with the search committee, and that was trying to kind of stuff all of them together, and not start the community one so late. So, you know, maybe it could have started a little bit later for the educators, but overall, I mean, people were really appreciative of having the chance to come and meet folks. And And we were happy that so many people came out. It spoke really well of our Hartford community, right?
It definitely did.
People came out in the morning session among business and nonprofit folks and foundation folks. People really came out in the educator forum in the afternoon, and then in the evening one, the community, really came out. So, I always want more parents to be there. I saw a lot of community leaders. I saw some parents, but I would have loved to have seen, 150 parents instead of 50 or so that were there. But it's hard as a parent to get out and come out to this kind of thing. So just the fact that there were parents there, and their community leaders, and some educators and other folks was great. It was great.
Yeah. So and obviously I think once the superintendent starts, there will be more opportunities to hear from her and listening tours or whatever, whatever she decides to do, or however she decides to get out and to meet some folks. So
absolutely. I think to kind of summarize, just we wrote a story on the forums, but we didn't want to show any support for one or the other, and just out of respect for the process. But I think folks who were there told me anyway that they thought that Beth seemed to be a little bit more experienced with reform, with handling issues as complex as Hartford's, and that Dr. Taylor, coming from a smaller district, really had to kind of prove that he was kind of sophisticated enough to handle this level of reform. And people, I think the community forum, seemed to jive a little bit better with Dr. Taylor, and I think she jived a little bit better with the educator forum. So, I think it ended up being, I think, a pretty tough decision for the search committee. But I think, one of the big important takeaways is what the issues were that they were talking about. I mean, so many of the questions that came in that we collected were on equity. Right? I mean, that's like the question of the day right now in Hartford, is that, how can you be, I was at a meeting at Burns this morning, you can be in Zone 3, and, the Hartford Magnet Trinity College Academy, that magnet school, right, can have an average of 80%, CMT scores, right? And then you can be at Burns, and it's like a 27.4% average CMT scores across all subjects, all grades, and you're thinking to yourself, they're not even a mile away. I mean, like what is going on, right? And how, as a district, do you actually commit, like, wholeheartedly with resources, with ways to make sure that even as students move, that they can get transportation back to that school, even with staffing to make sure that you've got the best staff, at your toughest schools. How do you create systems that are going to allow these schools to flourish? And it takes time, but you've got to be committed with 5-year plans and getting principals to stick around and supporting the heck out of them and soliciting outside resources for the school. I mean, there's been a lot of comprehensive reform work in Hartford the last 7 years under Dr. Adamowski and Dr. Kishimoto, but they have not cracked the nut when it comes to our chronically low-performing, challenged neighborhood schools like Clark, Sand, Wish, Burns. I mean, these are schools that are in desperate need of additional help and guidance, and central office better figure out quick under the new superintendent how to add some serious value to those schools so that they don't feel like they're either a dumping ground or that they're just left to fend for themselves. That's the challenge of the day in Hartford. That's the challenge, I would say, in education reform nationally. And from my meeting at Burns, talking to the principal, the challenge is even bigger than anyone thinks it is. So the minute you start really, unpeeling the layers in the onion, you find out, wow, how much time has to be spent on discipline, on getting mental health and physical health needs met so kids can come ready to learn. I mean, these are things that everyone knows, and everyone kind of says we're working on it, but the era of I would say less accountability to actually get those supports at the school needs to end. Everyone wants to talk about accountability around you. Well, I'm driving accountability because I'm looking at your scores. Well, why don't we all start driving accountability as it relates to are we getting the support to those schools that can actually produce those scores? So.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because that seems to be the strength that Dr. Narvaez brings to the table in her role in Montgomery County as the leader in school support, in school improvement, and coming from such a larger district. I would think that's a strength that the committee or the board looked at as to answer that question.
I have to agree with you, and she showcased it a bit in her answers. So, we'll see how much up to the task she is. It sounds like she's very excited about being here in Hartford. I'm sure folks will welcome her with open arms and be ready to get the work done and to be supportive. I know we will, but we'll also be looking for some real strong accountability to make sure that schools get the support they need.
Well, we are about out of time, so until next week in our next education update, we'll recap on what happened at the budget hearing and some other pressing issues that we need to get to.
Right, maybe there'll be an update even on Clark.
Yeah.
You know, so
there's still a lot.
We'll see what's going on there.
Yeah. All right, so you have been updated for this week. Thank you for joining us, and as always, we welcome your comment, questions, and feedback on Facebook, Twitter, or by email, or even by phone. So see you next time.
Take care.